The topic of happiness has been studied from many angles, but its connection with beauty has been seriously neglected. When I started Project Beauty, an endeavor aimed at raising awareness about the way we experience beauty, I drafted a survey of about 45 questions on beauty. To be able to link our level of happiness to the way we experience beauty, I then also included one validated question about subjective well-being. The learnings in this masterclass build on the data we've gathered and about writings on beauty in general. Why is it important to pay attention to this? The curiosity about how happiness and beauty relate to each other is not new. The French philosopher Stendhal, who lived at the end of the 18th century, once wrote, "Beauty is only a promise of happiness." And from the modern philosopher Alain de Botton is the quote, "A lump rises in our throat at the sight of beauty from an implicit knowledge that the happiness it hints at is an exception." So people have wondered about the connection between happiness and beauty, and they found it rather complex. In philosophy, poetry, and also music, of course, there are many connections. But in science and research, it's rare. Except, of course, about the topic of happiness and physical beauty. This is something that intrigues us as human beings immensely. The American psychologist James Hillman remarked once, "Of all of psychology's sins, the most mortal is the neglect of beauty." And even though happiness nowadays is also part of the world of policy making, beauty is almost never mentioned here. Also, prestigious publication like the World Happiness Report hardly mentions beauty. Over the past years, this publication had almost no reference to beauty whatsoever. According to the team of scientists that is responsible for this survey, beauty apparently has no impact on happiness. In a wider policy framework, like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, human well-being is mentioned. But when one has a deeper look at the indicators which are used for measuring well-being, it will be disappointing. The only one that actually has a reference to well-being is the suicide rate in a country. It is not surprising that the word beauty is nowhere to be found in the SDG texts. Reason, probably? Beauty is such a personal concept that almost everybody has a different opinion about it. Hence, we often try to avoid getting into discussions about the real meaning. Beauty is a word. It's language. Happiness is also a word, but a much more specific one. It denotes a state of mind. Beauty is often used to describe some set of characteristics of basically everything. Happiness goes inward, beauty goes everywhere. But what is the connection between happiness and beauty? The way people deal with beauty is strongly connected to their level of happiness. We know this from the data of Project Beauty. Some examples of what we've learned. Over the years, we've asked over 14,000 people what kind of beauty is the most important in their lives. The questionnaire offers 18 options that roughly cover the elements of the Maslow pyramid. Universally, over all countries, the options most chosen is the character of a person. It varies per country, of course, but no country is an exception. People that choose this option are on average pretty happy. Much lesser chosen are the options knowledge and religion. But between these two groups, we see a serious gap in their level of happiness. People who say that for them religion is the most important type of beauty are significantly more happy than people who prioritize the beauty of knowledge. Also, the beauty of clothes and silence were two options offered. Not many people prefer them as the most important in their life, but here we see something that might even surprise us. People who state that for them beauty of clothes is the most important type of beauty in their life are significantly more happy than people who prioritize the beauty of silence. We have no data about what causes this, so it leaves us guessing. An assumption might be that people who find their ultimate beauty in silence struggle more with the hassle and speed of our current society, whereas people who are totally into buying fashion are well equipped to deal with the barrage of stimuli that is part of modern life. Also, quite a lot of people, over 70%, feel that beauty is not just a heavenly phenomenon, but feel that it also has a dangerous side. They are aware that beauty doesn't always lead to happiness. Fact is, we are partially able to work on our level of happiness. Lubomirsky, author of The How of Happiness, distinguished 3 happiness determinants: accidents, hereditary, and training. So here maybe lies an opening in the last part. If beauty and happiness are connected, maybe our level of happiness would benefit from some training in the way we deal with beauty. Talking about beauty. Theorizing about the how of beauty sometimes feel like sand slipping through our fingers, because beauty is such a diverse concept. Also, sensing beauty is something very different from arguing and explaining beauty. A theoretical book about the philosophy of aesthetics is not necessarily a beautiful book. So let's for a moment forget about every assumption we have about beauty, but observe how we talk about beauty and behave when we experience beauty. First, how we talk about the language of beauty. When people talk about beauty, often they talk in terms of attraction. We even use words that have kinetic references, like being moved or fallen for, when we describe how we feel. And the term attraction itself, which originally stems from the Latin attrahere, to draw, pull or drag to, or towards with a force. And then how we behave. When we see something beautiful, we are inclined to move towards it. So beauty can fasten our pace or bend our direction of moving. Or even, passing by a beautiful thing, it can stop us in our tracks, taking away our speed of moving. All, in fact, mechanical incidents. So what is happening here? In essence, attraction is a concept also used in physics, specifically in mechanics. Things, for instance, move because there are forces at work that cause them to be attracted to each other. Think, for instance, of magnets or even gravity, caused by the fact that heavy objects, like the Earth, attract less heavy objects, like the people walking on it. So here comes in something that you might have heard of, the duck test. When it looks like a duck, when it swims like a duck, quacks like a duck, it actually might be a duck. It's called abductive reasoning. Let's dive deeper into this. Let's see how it works in physics. How do top nerds in physics think about force? Force comes from physics, so what happens in physics when the researchers had a deeper look at the essence of a force? Originally, it was the idea that a force was an attribute of an object. Actually, the complete view of mechanics as seen by Newton was based on this idea. The apple falls down from the tree because it is attracted by the earth. Then physicists started to look deeper at what actually happened and discovered that this object-subject approach doesn't really do justice to what is happening. It is not just about two objects and their characteristics, but also what happens in the void between them, in what you could call the field. They discovered that this is not just empty space, but that there's a lot happening in this field. They discovered that a force is actually not an aspect of something, but more like this field. We are leaving the area of Newton and entering the age of Werner Heisenberg, Niels Bohr and Isaac Newton. We could call it the age of quantum physics. Remarkable, in his book a beautiful question, the quantum physicist and Nobel Prize winner Frank Wilczek actually asks if some of our total cosmos is based on beauty. He even paraphrases what happens between an electron, which circles around the nucleus of an atom, and he gives the electron a voice. And it says to the nucleus, I am attracted to you, but I need my own space. So much for similarities between beauty and the phenomenon of a force. Back to beauty, and first of all, how we talk about beauty. When people talk about beauty, most of the time they are busily labeling something or somebody. For some reason, maybe they are too complex, we move away from our feelings and apply this mysterious etiquette. Something is beautiful. In some sense, it is the same as if we say something is green, big and heavy. We give it a stamp. Maybe try to notice this for yourself the next time when you run into something beautiful. What do you actually say? Most likely you will describe it by giving this intriguing judgment. Fact is, these acts of labeling are pretty much based on the old-fashioned way of thinking about attraction in physics. One thing, you, is attracted by something else, a dress, a car, a piece of art, and starts describing it or even explaining this. As you see, our usual way of talking about beauty is very much based in this object-subject approach. We voice our fascination about what is happening between us and a perceiving person and some object or event in our surrounding environment. And in this we behave not very different from the talking electron David Wilczek described. But how would it be if beauty actually really has similarities with the way a force field works in physics? If, even for a short moment, we would get rid of this subject-object approach, as if this beautiful thing just was too complex to describe. Or just suppose it was forbidden to label something or someone as beautiful. What is there that still remains to be said? The issue is, if there is a similarity between what we know about forces and how we look at beauty, what do these new ideas from the world of physics mean for the way we deal with beauty? My idea is that it would be different. Because we would not focus on a thing, but on what we experience, on how we feel. Something which is of course less easy than just mentioning that we think something or someone is beautiful. For many people, voicing their emotions can be scary, something you only do when asked by a therapist. But the truth is, focusing on how we feel around beauty actually brings us closer to happiness. Data shows that over 60% of the people associate being around beauty with a feeling of happiness, which is twice as much as the feeling that was named second, being glad. So, maybe a tip. Focus on the experience of this sense of attraction and not on the object. Sense, how does it make you feel? And maybe even voice your feelings. The goal is move away, or I would say beyond labeling. Be more specific. Name a feeling. Admiration, awe, delight, ecstasy, love, and of course happiness. Name behavior you would want to show. Buy, move towards, be around, and maybe even touch. Don't stop at just saying this is beautiful. Go further, even if it feels uncomfortable. Don't go into object mode and imagine you're in a field and explore how it feels to be there. What is there to learn? First of all, well-being and happiness are not found by chasing it. Nice, pleasurable moments can be chased, but happiness is a deeper, durable emotion. Chasing pleasure often doesn't bring happiness. Beauty as an object is something that is often chased. That is to say, some kinds of beauty, mostly material things. This element in our behavior very much drives part of the economy. And this, of course, also applies to the hunt for human beauty. The rather cynical remark of the French philosopher Stendhal, "Beauty is but a promise of happiness," was put to paper after he had a problematic infatuation on someone else's wife. Probably you are familiar with the quote, "The secret of happiness is having low expectations." It is sometimes ascribed to the American psychologist Barry Schwartz. Well, beauty often produces the opposite of this. 1 out of 10 people associate the feeling they have around beauty with ecstatic. So one can easily imagine how longing for this type of ecstasy can disrupt lasting happiness. Maybe the term "shop until you drop" is a sad example of this. Focusing on our feeling when we are around beauty, in a way, disconnects you from reactive behavior and allows space for reflection. We could call it meditate on beauty. Reflect on how being in its field feels before jumping to labeling and acting. There are many strategies and advices to increase happiness in your life. Count your blessings and practice gratitude. Be kind to yourself. Focus on problem solving and not just venting, and some very useful other tips. Looking at beauty as a force, not as a feature of something or someone we accidentally bump into, might be an additional strategy. The tip would be to identify trigger moments for behavior, moments you would recognize because you are using the word beauty. Then stop and insert a short moment of reflection and ask yourself, what is actually happening? How does this beautiful thing makes me feel? How does it make me want to act? Beauty is the ultimate personal experience, and everyone has his or her private way of experiencing it. If one doesn't, happiness is hard to find. This would suggest a connection between beauty and happiness that is rather ego-oriented. The term beauty is pretty much kidnapped by the consumer goods industry, with fashion and cosmetics companies in the lead. Sustainable ecology and regeneration, however, is an integral part of most happiness and well-being models nowadays. The G&H framework knows the ecological diversity and resilience component. The Well-Being Economy Alliance talks about an economy in service of life, meaning life in its broadest sense, so also plants, animals and the entire planet as its own system. The way we as humans so far have dealt with beauty hasn't contributed much to these ego goals. The psychologist Daniel Kahneman has identified 2 ways of thinking. System 1, the quick, intuitive, automatic and often unconscious way. System 2, which is slower, more analytical and conscious. Our dealings with beauty often belong to the first system. We focus on some object of desire and go and buy, or dress cool and make a selfie. In the object-subject world, beauty has an element of seduction, and so can lead to chasing behavior. Chasing beauty doesn't bring well-being, but the appeal of beauty certainly suggests it might. If we adopt more of a field perspective to how beauty may work, and not focus on labeling and reacting, it becomes easier to go inward and reflect on what is actually happening. The idea to use moments where beauty plays a role, to stop and reflect, gives the opportunity for a system switch. Happiness and well-being in the widest sense would benefit from this. The Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh used to say, "The way out is in." Maybe, if now and then, we would meditate a bit on how beauty makes us feel, instead of chasing it mindlessly, we might be a little bit more happy.